Hi everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me today. As you know, I like to drop new self-care and wellness ideas and thoughts every Tuesday. So here I am with this Tuesday's edition. And today I wanted to talk about why it is so hard to take good care of ourselves within the system that we have here in America. And you might think that I'm talking about healthcare system, but I'm not even talking about that specifically, though it is one of the issues that we have, definitely. And I don't need to tell you about that, I don't think. But what makes it so hard for Americans to take good care of themselves and to feel good and to have a life that has a village that where we feel supported and where we feel like we have connections to others and that we can do our good self-care routines. So the stuff that's happening at the federal level in our government right now is really not any different from why we can't take good care of ourselves as Americans. It's actually all interconnected in my view. So the two words that keep coming to mind are inhumane and antisocial. So what do I mean when I talk about these things? Something that is inhumane is not made for people, right? It's not the right scale, not the right size, not the right style. It's not really made for people, and it makes people feel not good, okay? So that's something that's inhumane. And what do I mean when I say antisocial? Situations and systems that are antisocial are where people are not behaving in the way that people feel like makes sense to them. And we start to feel off. We feel like we're not connected to others. We feel perhaps, like we're too focused on ourselves, but we don't know how to not be. And we don't know how to be in community. And so we're not connected socially in the way that human beings tend to want to be. And you may be telling me, well, I'm an introvert and I don't want to connect to people socially very much. That's a little bit different. What I'm talking about are the general needs that humans have to be around other people like themselves, to, relate to others, to be in community. And that kind of is broadly speaking, okay? So the thing that launched me into thinking about these concepts is the other day, I was walking up a busy commercial road with my daughter. We had gotten off the bus and we decided that walking the rest of the way was the best approach. And the street was really strewn with litter. Now in March in upstate New York, if you've ever been here, this is normal because when the snow melts, all the stuff that's been in the snow and stuff people have thrown throughout the whole winter starts to show itself. And it's kind of a yucky time of year for that reason. But the litter really grabbed my attention, and it really spoke to me of this antisocial, inhumane environment that we're living in, that we just all exist in as Americans, almost all of us, unless you live in a small walkable village or a densely populated urban center. You are probably living in an antisocial and inhumane environment. And so basically, we have a car culture. As long as you're not in those small villages or densely packed urban centers, in most of America, it is designed at this point to be car-centric, and if you are behind the wheel of a car, it becomes so much easier to drop something out your window, especially in an area that doesn't feel important or meaningful to you. We all tend to think like, oh, who would litter? Why would anyone ever do that? But it's the kind of thing that happens so much more on a busy commercial area than a small residential street. Because when you're on a small residential street, usually the speed is slower and everything is a little bit closer together. You feel like people would be looking at you, right? And so when there's not eyes on the street, as the amazing writer of the 20th century, Jane Jacobs, wrote, without eyes on the street, there is a sense of meaninglessness, of disconnection from other people, and a lack of community. And so that's a place where someone might drop their food wrappers or their garbage out their window. more so than they would do on a small residential street, because there's a sense of like someone will see it. It matters to someone, right? We have this kind of perception, even if it's very, very subtle and we don't think outwardly a lot about it. Like, where would you rather hang out and have a conversation with somebody? On a small residential side street or on the busiest commercial thoroughfare in your town, you know? Why is that? Because it's noisy. The cars are passing very quickly. It doesn't feel safe. It feels loud. It feels inhumane. So because we have this car culture and this car culture mentality in America, you know, when we travel to Europe, and when anyone I know travels to Europe, one of the things that they really note about it is the density, the ease of going and finding what you need at a store, which is only 1 or 2 blocks away most of the time. And, you know, if you're in New York City, you understand this, but most places in America are not like that. And it pretty much begins to necessitate the moving around in a vehicle to get anything done effectively, efficiently. Otherwise, you're spending the whole day on the bus. And by the way, we have terrible public transit systems in a lot of our cities and communities. So it really starts to force your hand towards vehicles. Okay, so where am I going with all of this, right? What the heck does this have to do with self-care and a village and all this stuff, right? So if you have been to Europe before, you see in the towns how everyone who lives there is interacting with people. And they may not be socializing the whole time. They may not be like chatting with people or stopping. But there is because people are walking, because everything is dense and you can walk like 1 block to the laundromat, 1 block to the wine store, 1 block to the restaurant you want to go to, 2 blocks to the pharmacy. Everything is so close that you cannot help but encounter other human beings. And also, it doesn't even make sense to get in a car, right? It does not make sense to get in a car when you're in a densely packed urban environment or even village environment, right? So like, why drag your car out when you just got to walk a couple blocks to get everything that you need or do everything that you need to do? So because that is so alien to us as Americans, and because we've become so used to car culture, and I grew up in the country, where you had to do everything in a car, unless you were just literally going across the street to your neighbor's house. But that car culture mentality of us being behind the wheel of a car, behind glass, behind steel, and not facing each other, it becomes that antisocial kind of feeling where I'm not saying we're all like yelling and screaming behind the wheels of our cars, or we're all really like dumping litter out the window or anything like that. But it starts to feel like you could do those things. No one would know. No one would notice. No one would take note, right? And I'm not saying I'm encouraging that. I'm saying that because we're so familiar with the environment of being in a car and of feeling protected and private and personal and isolated in our cars, and that is becoming just the way we live. And then add to all of that the pandemic. When the pandemic was happening and the lockdowns were going on, most people were not going out and socializing. We're not going out and meeting up with people or going to places, restaurants, bars, events, right? And so because those things weren't happening and everything turned to online, which was what we had to do if we wanted to still connect with each other, so it was necessary, I get it. But I think that was really the final nail in the coffin of the kind of pro-social behavior that we used to engage in before the pandemic happened. And so if you think about the tendencies that we might have had, even in small urban centers or, densely packed places, I'm starting to see more and more antisocial behavior happening. And we're so, and again, like, how am I sending and delivering this video to you right now? I'm recording it on a phone. I'm saving it. I'm putting it up on an online channel, right? So like, I am not upset that these technologies exist. I'm talking about the ways in which we're using them and the ways that it's harming our social functions as humans overall when it's too much, when we're using it and we're relying on it almost completely. So, so the idea that we are being so online and so connected to each other only through this medium of the internet starts to create issues for us because it's not how we're meant to be. We're not meant to exclusively be online with each other. And there's so much pulling back from social events and connecting with people in real life. And it's possible to do in America. This is part of the reason why we have such trouble building a village right now. And it is not your fault, and you shouldn't be judging yourself for it, because it is systemic. And it is everywhere in American culture. And if you're seeing this and you're not in the US, I would love to hear your feedback about it. Or you've been outside of the US quite a bit, I'd love to hear your feedback about it. But if this is the way that we tend to be, and this is what we tend to do, it's reinforcing itself, you know? And so when you are out there trying to make connections with people, trying to do mutual aid, trying to build connections with your neighbors or with people within a certain social group that you know, and, you know, you're struggling to like get everybody to meet up at a particular place or time, struggling to get people to see the importance and necessity of meeting in person. And I'm on an age boundary here too, because I'm just between Gen X and Millennial. I'm about to be 46. It's my birthday month. And so, you know, I see the tendencies of the generation that's older than me and the tendencies of the generation that's younger than me. So if you're noticing that it is really hard to get people to like go out in the world and do things, this is part of the reason, is because we're becoming more and more entrenched in this just kind of antisocial way of being, even though we're connecting with each other all the time. It's a really kind of upside down feeling where you're like, there's never been more people I could see, listen to, learn from, you know, meet on a group on Facebook or, you know, whatever. And yet at the same time, we've never felt more isolated and alone, right? So I just want to say that when we talk about this also at the beginning, I talked about this at the federal level and how the behaviors of the leadership at the federal level, I think they're just playing out. This is what antisocial culture and inhumane culture leads us towards, is like this most extreme example, because where, you know, certain people are saying, you know, not everybody deserves to have equal rights or equal access or equal health care, or, you know, like you don't matter and you don't matter, but I matter. You know, this is antisocial behavior. So that's an extreme case where that is how far it can go, right? And so when we are just thinking about our own needs, our own selves, our own situations, our mini little communities of friends and family and loved ones, you know, you could feel completely overwhelmed by this moment, and you're saying, okay, like I live in this antisocial culture. What should I do? How can I combat this? How can I take care of myself and take care of those in my circle if this is the environment, this is the soup that we're swimming in? Well, the first thing that you can do is start to recognize it. You know, start to realize there's a reason why we are this way. And, you know, this is my take on it. I'd love to hear your take as well. There's lots of complicated reasons for America and Americans being the way they are now, but this is one aspect of what I think is causing it. But being aware that this is what's going on, and no wonder it's so difficult to, you know, pull people out of that online only kind of aspect and say, okay, it's not me. It's the time that we're in. It's this moment that we're experiencing. It's the kind of cultural history that has led to this moment, and recognize that that's a big part of what's going on right now. You know, the other thing that you can do is start to think about, you know, you cannot necessarily combat car culture or things like that. You can walk to the store, but it doesn't make the store more walkable, right? Like, things do not become more dense and urban because you want them to be. It is a systemic policy level, like big kind of thing that needs the solutions of leadership. So another thing I would say is I would encourage you to learn more about urbanism, walkability, historic preservation, follow people who are interesting leaders in these topics and who are advocates for these things at the government level, or who are local community people who advocate for these things to the government, because that's how we will improve our communities in terms of their external qualities that will lead to us having more third spaces, more places where we can meet up, less commercialism and more community. And then also, I would say the best thing that you can do is try to connect with people who are nearby and who are near to your heart. Talk to them about the fact that you want to be able to walk over and say hi, or come over and ask a question, or look for something, share items, share what you need, because I think that building community really has to start in the closest places where it is easiest and simplest for you. Because this is a very high bar. It's a lot to expect of ourselves as individuals. It's, like I said, it's a systemic problem. It's going to need system-wide solutions. But where you can start is with your own neighbors. Start to reach out to them a little bit more. And again, it's interesting, right? I'm advocating for all of these community and face-to-face things, but the best way to reach out to somebody might be to get their number and to text them every once in a while, even though they live right across the street from you. And from there, when you see them, you guys know a little bit about each other. You can meet up, you can say hi, you can do outreach within the small little neighborhood and with the people who matter to you, and start very, very small. And again, follow the people who are doing really cool things, who are advocating for really cool things, who are trying to make our communities better. I don't think there's a way to go back and undo the car culture and the mentality that comes along with it in our country. But if you've traveled at all and you've seen what's great about other communities and how they have better, mental health and better accessibility to services and stores and things, and also they just seem to just be naturally more connected to each other. And, those are principles that we can ask for. We can bring them back into our communities. But it's going to take all of us understanding, why does that matter? So that's my TED Talk for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would love to hear your feedback on this idea. Let's discuss it. Let's chat about it. Feel free to send me a message, or you can comment below. And I look forward to chatting with you again next week.